What happens when an entire city relies on just one job? These 15 places show how communities built around a single occupation can thrive together, or collapse and vanish overnight. Here are 15 cities where everyone has the same job. Starting with number 15, Longyearbyen in Swalbard, Norway. So, Longyearbyen, it's the northernmost permanently inhabited town in the world. It's located on the Svalbard archipelago in the Arctic Ocean. Originally, it was founded in 1906 as a coal mining settlement by American businessman John Longyear, and the town functioned for most of its history with a workforce entirely focused on coal extraction. For decades, nearly every resident worked directly in mining operations or in support roles related to the industry, like transport, maintenance, or administration. The coal mine that drove the town's existence, Mine Number 1, was operated by the Arctic Coal Company and later taken over by a Norwegian state-owned enterprise. For the majority of the 20th century, though, the town's economy revolved solely around the extraction of coal, with workers living in company-owned housing, shopping at company-run stores, and sending their children to company-sponsored schools. There were no private landowners, independent businesses, or secondary industries for much of that time, and the town was effectively a closed mining community. The remoteness of it reinforced the single-industry character of the town. It's located more than 800 miles from the North Pole and surrounded by Arctic tundra. The town had no road connections to the rest of Norway or even other settlements on Svalbard. Supplies had to be brought in by ship or air, and residents relied on their employer for nearly all the essentials. Life here was structured entirely around the demands of the coal mining operation. Over time, though, the role of mining has diminished. Several major mines have closed, including Mine 1, which stopped operations in 1987, but in recent decades the town has diversified its economy to include tourism, scientific research, and higher education, including the University Center in Svalbard. However, remnants of its single-job past remain visible in the infrastructure, the layout, and the culture of the town. Store Norsk still operates Mine 7 on a limited basis, and a number of residents are still directly or indirectly employed by coal-related work. Still, for most of the 20th century, it fit the model of a mono-industrial town, virtually all economic and daily activity centered on coal mining. It stands today as a transition case, once a pure single-job town, now evolving but still shaped by its origins. Number 14, McMurdo Station on Ross Island, Antarctica. So McMurdo Station, it is the largest research base in Antarctica, and it serves as the logistics hub for the United States Antarctic Program. Established in 1955 on the southern tip of Ross Island, McMurdo is not a permanent town in the traditional sense. But during its peak summer season, it houses more than 1,000 people, all of whom are engaged in some aspect of polar science or scientific support. In this sense, it does function as a community where everyone is focused on the same broad occupation, scientific research, and logistics. The population does have geologists, biologists, glaciologists, and atmospheric scientists conducting field work across the continent, and alongside them are technical staff, mechanics, engineers, cooks, and administrative personnel, whose role is to keep the station running smoothly so research operations can proceed. Every job, whether manual or academic, serves the mission of advancing scientific understanding of Antarctica and related global systems. McMurdo does have its own power plant, water treatment facility, dormitories, cafeterias, medical center, and recreational amenities. However, these exist not to support a general population, but to serve the specialized workforce of researchers and their support teams. The station is managed by the National Science Foundation, the NSF, and it's operated in conjunction with military and civilian contractors, many of whom return seasonally for specific projects. There is no private commerce or local economy here. All supplies are brought in by air or through an annual resupply ship, and there's no independent jobs or businesses. Everyone at the base is either directly employed by the NSF or by a contracted agency to perform a designated role in service of scientific objectives. Even recreation like movie nights, hiking, or participating in local events like the annual Antarctic 5K is structured around the rhythm of work and logistical operations. Due to the extreme environment and remoteness, all personnel must undergo rigorous physical screening and safety training. The station operates under strict protocols, and life is highly regimented. The communal living arrangements, shared work schedules, and coordinated meal times further contribute to that sense that McMurdo is a fully integrated single-purpose settlement. And while McMurdo Station is not a town in the traditional civic sense, it functions year after year as a city-like enclave with a single focus. Every resident is there for the same purpose, making it one of the most concentrated examples of a same-job community anywhere in the world. Number 13. Karuna, Norrbotten County in Sweden. Karuna is the northernmost town in Sweden, and it's long been dominated by a single industry, iron ore mining. Established in the early 20th century, Karuna developed in conjunction with the discovery and exploitation of one of the largest and richest iron ore deposits in the world, located in the nearby Karunavara mountain. The town owes its very existence to the mining operations managed by a state-owned mining company that remains the area's primary employer. Virtually all economic, social, and infrastructural development here in Karuna has historically revolved around the iron ore mine. The company has directly employed a large portion of the local population for decades, and most other residents work in roles that support the mining ops, such as equipment maintenance, transport logistics, housing management, or administrative service. The town was deliberately planned and constructed to serve as a residential base for mine workers and their families. But mining is carried out underground, with iron ore extracted and transported through railways to ports on the Baltic Sea. The mine, of course, is operational 24/7, and it contributes a substantial percentage of Europe's iron ore supply. Because of the depth and scale of these activities, the underground voids have caused some ground subsidence in the town, prompting one of the most ambitious urban relocation projects in modern history. In the 2000s, the Swedish government and the company owning the mine determined that the town's central district would be eventually compromised by mine-related ground deformation. As a result, entire neighborhoods, public buildings, and infrastructure, including the town hall and main church, are being relocated several kilometers to the east. This move, which has been underway for over a decade, shows the degree to which the town is tied to its singular economic base. This new urban center is being developed with modern urban planning principles, but the driving reason remains the continuation of mining. Though there have been efforts to diversify the economy with some tourism, especially related to the Northern Lights and the nearby Ice Hotel, space research, and local services, iron ore mining, though, still defines daily life and employment here. LCAB, the company, directly or indirectly employs thousands of people, and the town's schedule, economy, and even long-term urban planning remain subject to the operational realities of the mine. Karuna exemplifies the concept of a company town in the modern era. Despite government involvement, though, and increasing diversification, the overwhelming majority of the population is still tied in some form or another to the same job: producing, processing, and supporting the extraction of iron ore. Number 12. Arit, Agadez region in Niger. Arit is a remote desert town in northern Niger that exists almost entirely due to the presence of uranium mining. Established in the late 1960s following the discovery of large uranium deposits in the Sahara, Arit quickly became a focal point of industrial activity. The town was constructed to support workers employed in the nearby uranium mines operated by Somer and Cominac, both subsidiaries of the French nuclear conglomerate Orano, that was formerly Areva. The uranium mining operations here are of global importance. At their peak, the region's mines contributed significantly to the global supply of uranium used in nuclear power and weaponry. The labor force in Arit is highly concentrated around this single industry. Most residents work directly in uranium extraction or in support functions. Transport, equipment maintenance, chemical processing, water supply, and housing infrastructure is all orchestrated by the mining companies. The town was built with little attention to long-term sustainability or any diversification. It includes worker housing compounds, schools, and clinics, mostly provided or managed by the mining companies. And while some service jobs exist, they largely serve the mining community. Arit remains deeply independent on success and continuation of uranium production. So due to its isolated location, it's entirely dependent on outside supplies for food, equipment, and fuel. Security, too, is another major concern. The area has faced instability due to militant activity in the broader Sahel region, and this has led to periodic interruptions in operations and a heavy reliance on corporate or military protection. Health and environmental concerns, too, have also plagued this place. Uranium mining generates some radioactive waste and dust, and many local and international observers have raised some alarms over the lack of adequate safety measures for both workers and the surrounding communities. Still, though, economic alternatives are limited. Employment in the mines, despite the risks, remains the only viable livelihood for many people. In recent years, though, some of the uranium deposits in the region have become less productive, and one major mine, Komanak, was closed in 2021. This has led to some economic decline in Arit, reinforcing the town's dependence on a dwindling resource. Yet, despite the fluctuations in demand, the majority of the population remains tied to the industry. Very few alternative economic opportunities even exist due to the town's location and the infrastructure here. It's a textbook example of a mono-industrial settlement where virtually everyone is connected to the same job, extracting uranium. The rise, structure, and long-term challenges reflect the consequences, both economic and environmental, of building a town around a single commodity. Number 11. Wabush, Newfoundland and Labrador in Canada. Wabush is a small town in western Labrador in Canada, built explicitly to support iron ore mining ops. Established in the 1960s, the town was founded alongside the development of the Wabush Mine by Wabush Mines Company, a joint venture between several Canadian and international steel and mining firms. From its inception, nearly every resident here either worked directly in the mine or in jobs that supported its function, making it a classic example of a single-industry community. The town is located near the Labrador Trough, a geological region rich in iron ore deposits. The mine, including both open pit and later underground operations, as well as a concentrator facility for processing the extracted ore, Wabush was built just a few kilometers from the mine site, offered housing, schools, and essential services for workers and their families. Its growth and daily rhythm were tied entirely to the production and shipping of iron ore. The ore from the mine was transported by the Quebec North Shore and Labrador Railway to the port of Sept-Îles in Quebec for international shipment. This required a coordinated workforce not only in the extraction and processing of the ore, but also in transportation logistics, maintenance, and equipment support. All of these roles were either operated by or contracted through companies tied to the mining sector, leaving little room for any unrelated employment. During the height of its operation, Wabush, along with the adjacent town of Labrador City, formed a tightly independent economic region that was dominated by iron ore mining. Residents often worked in shifts that aligned with the mine's operation, and local amenities operated on schedules designed around the mine worker routines. Schools, grocery stores, and public services adjusted to accommodate the shift changes and transportation timetables, and like many resource-dependent towns, it experienced economic instability tied to global commodity markets. The original mine was eventually acquired by the Cliffs Natural Resources and later idled in 2014 due to falling iron ore prices. This closure led to significant job loss and outmigration, leaving the town in a difficult economic position. Subsequent attempts to revive mining in the area, including efforts by Takora Resources, have partially restored activity. But the workforce remains closely tied to the success or failure of the mine. Even today, Wabush's economy is overwhelmingly dependent on iron mining. While there have been modest efforts to encourage some economic diversification, the town's infrastructure, labor force, and local identity remain shaped by a single occupation. Almost all employment is either directly or indirectly connected to mining, from equipment operators and geologists to mechanics, truck drivers, and administrative staff. It shows how resource towns built for one purpose can thrive for decades, but remain vulnerable to shifts in global demand. Its tightly focused job base provides economic clarity, but also economic risk as the town's fortunes continue to hinge on the global iron ore market. Number 10. Gillette, Wyoming in the United States. Gillette, a city in northeastern Wyoming, is often referred to as the energy capital of the nation due to its central role in coal production from the Powder River Basin. While larger and more developed than many other single-industry towns, Gillette's economy has long been dominated by coal mining. A significant portion of its workforce is either directly or indirectly involved in mining or industries that exist to support it, making it a city where nearly everyone is tied to the same job. The Powder River Basin contains some of the largest coal reserves in the United States, and surface mining in the region accounts for over 40% of U.S. coal production. Major companies like Peabody Energy, Arch Resources, and Black Thunder operate massive strip mines in the area, employing thousands of people in roles like equipment operation, blasting, haulage, reclamation, and safety oversight. Gillette's growth over the past several decades has been largely tied to the expansion of coal production. Housing developments, schools, and retail areas have expanded to accommodate workers and their families, and many service providers from construction contractors to restaurant owners rely heavily on the local mining economy for their customer base. The presence of related industries like oil and gas services and power generation adds to the city's energy sector focus, but coal remains its core economic engine. The city's become home to a number of technical training programs and trade schools focused on mining and energy, reflecting the specialized nature of the local job market. The Gillette College Technical Education Center, for example, offers courses in welding, diesel mechanics, and electrical systems, all fields aligned with the demands of coal and resource extraction. Despite any efforts to diversify, though, including investments in renewable energy and carbon capture technology, Gillette's identity is still deeply linked to coal. Local politics, community events, and educational priorities all reflect this reality. Billboards and local news coverage and even high school mascot themes often incorporate mining imagery or slogans. Residents commonly have multiple family members employed at the same time or across different mine sites in the region. In recent years, though, the city has faced some pressure due to some declining national demand for coal. Environmental regulations, competition from natural gas, and the rise of renewables have impacted production levels. Still, though, mining jobs remain some of the highest-paying positions in the area, and many residents continue to depend on the industry for economic security. Gillette is a modern version of a one-job town, scaled up to the level of a small city. The infrastructure, economy, and social fabric revolve around coal mining to such a degree that almost every business, household, and institution is directly or indirectly tied to the same line of work. Number 9. Moanda, Gabon. Moanda is one of Gabon's most important mining towns. It's built almost entirely around the extraction and processing of manganese. Located in the southeastern part of the country, near to the border with the Republic of Congo, Moanda was established in the 1950s after the discovery of large manganese deposits in the region. The town rapidly grew into a single industry hub centered on the operations of a mining company originally founded by the French group Arit and still operating as the primary employer in the region. Now, manganese is a critical mineral used in steel production and battery manufacturing. Moanda is situated next to one of the largest manganese reserves in the world, and the company has developed extensive open-pit mines and processing infrastructure in this area. The majority of the population here works directly in manganese extraction or transport or processing, and other employers and services that support the industry like trucking, housing maintenance, utilities, or administration are all tied to the mine's operations. The infrastructure here was developed primarily to support the needs of the mine workers. Nearly every aspect of life in Moanda has been shaped by the presence of the mine. Public services, even cultural events are coordinated in conjunction with the mining schedule. The local economy here, though, is not diversified. Small businesses, where they exist, cater almost entirely to mine employees and their families. One of the most significant logistical features of this operation is the railway link to the port of Oendo near Libreville. This railway was constructed specifically to export manganese to international markets, and it's operated primarily to serve the company's freight requirements. The volume of manganese transported from here to the coast has kept this infrastructure viable for decades, but further reinforces the mono-industrial nature of the town. In recent years, it's expanded into processing and refining manganese locally, building a metallurgical complex in Moanda in 2015. That development has added more jobs in metallurgy and technical operations, but these remain directly within the scope of manganese production. Although some educational institutions have been introduced to train local workers in engineering and industrial skills, they are overwhelmingly aimed at preparing residents for employment with the company or its contractors. Moanda remains one of the clearest examples in Central Africa of a town where nearly every job, manual, technical, or administrative, is tied to a single commodity. The long-standing dependence on manganese mining defines the urban layout, the transportation systems, and the labor market, making it a textbook case of a mono-industrial economy. Number 8. Newman, Australia. Hello, Newman. It's a remote mining town located in the Pilbara region of Western Australia, founded in the 1960s specifically to support iron ore mining operations. The town was built by Mount Newman Mining Company, now part of BHP, to serve as a residential base for employees working at the Mount Whaleback Mine, one of the largest open-pit iron ore mines in the world. From its inception, Newman has functioned almost exclusively as a company town, with nearly every resident either directly employed in mining or in services that support it. Mount Whaleback Mine opened in 1968, and it's been a central component of Australia's iron ore export economy. The mine and associated rail infrastructure were developed rapidly to meet growing international demand, particularly from Japan and later China. The company constructed housing, roads, schools, and essential services to support a permanent workforce in this region. For many years, BHP directly operated the town's utilities, airport, and even some local amenities. Today, it continues to be heavily relied on mining, with most residents working for BHP or contractors involved in drilling, blasting, loading, hauling, processing, or maintenance. Other roles include equipment servicing, water and power, transportation logistics, and engineering. The economy here is so specialized that most commercial activity exists to serve mine operations or the needs of the employees and their families. Newman also operates on a fly-in, fly-out labor model for some of its workforce, with workers flown in from other parts of Australia on rotational shifts. However, a significant residential population still resides in the town, with neighborhoods, schools, sports facilities tailored to accommodate a mining-centric community. Even civic initiatives and events are often sponsored or linked to BHP and its community outreach programs. Many small businesses here do rely on long-term contracts with BHP or its subcontractors, and there's very little alternative employment, and economic development initiatives often still relate to the mining industry. Newman does also play a role in the broader regional supply chain. It's connected by a private rail line to Port Hedland, where iron ore is shipped overseas. This logistical infrastructure is built specifically for ore export, and it further entrenches the town's dependence on a single industry. Despite the occasional push to promote tourism or local Aboriginal heritage, the reality remains that Newman exists because of mining. The town's schedule, economy, and environment all reflect the needs and priorities of a continuous, large-scale resource extraction operation. Even education and health services are influenced by the demands of the mine, with shift-friendly school hours and medical services focused on occupational health and safety. Newman continues to represent the archetype of an Australian resource town, built for one job, sustained by one job, and evolving only as far as that job allows. Its infrastructure and isolation reinforce the extent to which a single industry can define not just a town's economy, but its entire way of life. Moving on to number 7, Janang, Southern District of Botswana. Janang is a town in southern Botswana that exists almost entirely because of the diamond mine there, one of the richest diamond mines in the world by value. It's operated by Debswana, a joint venture between Botswana's government and De Beers. Janang has been a purpose-built mining town since the establishment in 1982. Nearly all of the town's population is employed either directly in diamond mining or in services that support it. The mine is an open-pit operation that produces high-grade diamonds in significant quantities. It's been a cornerstone of Botswana's national economy for a while, accounting for a substantial portion of export revenue and GDP. Due to the economic importance of the operation, Debswana invested heavily in constructing not just the mine itself, but an entire township to support the workforce. This included residential neighborhoods, schools, healthcare facilities, and recreation centers, all tied to the mining company. Support roles here, such as education, healthcare, and retail, are mostly staffed by people whose services are provided through or in partnership with Debswana. Local businesses primarily cater to the mine workers and their families, and the town's commercial services are limited due to its self-contained nature. Debswana does play a direct role in municipal governance, funding social services, community development, and even cultural activities. This centralization of services under one employer does create a tightly controlled, singularly focused urban environment. But because diamonds are a high-value resource with strict security requirements, it's not really fully open to outside access. Entry and movement around the mine and residential areas are controlled, and operations are highly regimented. This creates a layer of occupational uniformity that everyone within the town is connected to the same economic activity and subject to the same security. Efforts to diversify its economy has been ongoing at the national level, but Janang remains largely untouched by these transitions. The dependency here is on the diamond mine. It's so significant that any fluctuation in global diamond demand or production levels has immediate and widespread impact. Employment levels, service funding, even infrastructure upgrades are directly tied to the performance of a single industry. Janang is an example of a modern high-efficiency company town, sustained by one of the world's most valuable natural resources. And while the town is relatively well-resourced compared to other mining communities, its entire structure, population, and daily life revolve around a single job: diamond extraction and its support services. Number 6. Tanagashima Space Center in Japan. The Tanagashima Space Center is Japan's primary spaceport, located on the island of Tanagashima in Kagoshima Prefecture. While the island itself has a broader population and a mixed economy, the areas immediately surrounding the space center, especially the settlement around Minamatane, functions effectively as a single job zone. Here, the local economy and employment base are overwhelmingly focused on space launch operations, technical support, and aerospace research. Operated by JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, the Space Center was established in 1969, and it's grown into a highly specialized facility for launching satellites and testing rockets. The site includes launch pads, control centers, assembly buildings, and tracking stations, and all of them require a workforce trained in fields like aerospace engineering, mechanical maintenance, and communications. Most people living near the Space Center are employed either by JAXA or by private contractors associated with rocket launches. This includes technicians, safety personnel, engineers, and operations staff. Additionally, a number of support workers, including administrative personnel, transport drivers, and site maintenance crews, are tied to the center's operations. The schedule and economy of the nearby town here are directly impacted by the launch activities. Accommodation services, restaurants, and transportation systems see spikes in usage during the launch windows. School programs and local training opportunities often cater to students interested in technical careers related to aerospace. Outside of the technical staff, though, other employment more often links back to the Space Center through maintenance contracts, catering, or local business services. The frequency of launches and research activity does govern the pace of local life here, with economic slowdowns during periods of inactivity. Unlike traditional mono-industry towns based on natural resources, the space-focused workforce here operates a highly regulated and technologically advanced environment. While tourism has emerged as a secondary industry, especially during televised rocket launches, the community surrounding the center remains largely dependent on the spaceport. Though the rest of the island includes agriculture and fishing, this enclave around the Space Center is distinct in purpose and population. It functions similarly to an industrial campus, with specialized housing, internal transportation, and a workforce that's unified by a single focus: the success of Japan's space program. In this context, the community around the Space Center qualifies as a single-job town. Its infrastructure, economy, and daily life are all organized around one occupation: aerospace launch and support. Number 5. Nurilsk, Russia. So Nurilsk, it's one of the largest industrial cities in the Arctic Circle, and it's a prime example of a city where nearly every resident is employed in a single sector: mining and metallurgy. Located in Russia's northern Krasnoyarsk Krai, Nurilsk was founded in the 1930s as a forced labor settlement to exploit huge mineral resources in the area. Today, though, it remains dominated by Norilsk Nickel, also known as Nornickel, one of the world's largest producers of nickel, copper, palladium, and platinum. The industrial complex here includes huge mining operations, smelting facilities, ore concentration plants, and associated systems. The company owns and operates most of the city's infrastructure, including the utilities, housing, and transport. The majority of the working population is employed either directly by Norilsk Nickel or through subcontractors providing services. The city's been closed to foreigners since the early 2000s due to its strategic importance, and that further insulates it from any economic diversification. Norilsk's economy is heavily centralized, and outside employment opportunities are pretty minimal. Educational institutions, too, in the city are tailored to prepare students for careers in engineering, geology, metallurgy, and industrial safety, all fields directly connected to mining operations. The extreme remoteness and subarctic climate, though, intensify that single industry character. It's located more than 2,000 kilometers from major Russian cities, and it's accessible only by air or a specially built rail line during the ice-free season. This isolation has contributed to the city functioning as a self-contained industrial enclave. But Norilsk is consistently ranked as one of the most polluted cities in the world due to decades of heavy metal smelting. The company has begun some modernization and emissions reduction efforts, but the legacy of pollution continues to define the landscape here. Still though, the economic dependence on Norilsk nickel means few residents have the option to leave or find alternative work. Wages here are relatively high due to the climate and the health risks, and benefit packages are often pretty generous. This does incentivize residents to remain employed in the mining sector despite difficult working conditions. The entire soft fabric of Norilsk, schools, healthcare, housing, and public services, is organized around the company's needs, making it one of the clearest examples of a mono-industrial city operating at a large scale. Number 4. Chuki Chile. Chuquicamata, it's often referred to as Chuki, and it's home to one of the largest open-pit copper mines in the world. It's located in the Atacama Desert in Chile, and the settlement was built around copper mining and operated for decades as a classic company town. While the residential part of Chuki was officially closed in 2007 and residents relocated to nearby Calama, the mine and its associated infrastructure remain operational and continue to employ a large unified workforce focusing on a single task: extracting and processing copper. Operated by Codelco, the state-owned mining company, Chuki has played a critical role in Chile's economy. Codelco is the world's largest producer of copper, and Chuki's been central to its output since the early 20th century. At its peak, the town housed thousands of workers, all whom were directly or indirectly involved in mining. While Chuki is no longer functioning as a residential town, the workforce still operates as a coherent industrial community. Workers live primarily in Calama and commute to the mine for shift work. Codelco does provide transportation, training, and often oversees services that cater to the workforce. Support staff, including safety technicians, truck operators, engineers, and smelter technicians, make up the bulk of the employment in the area. The industrial complex here is one of the most integrated in the world, encompassing extraction, crushing, processing, and transport to the port terminals. Entire departments within Codelco and its contractors are dedicated to logistical coordination and industrial safety, all tied to the copper production. Local infrastructure development in Calama, including the schools, shopping centers, and housing, has all been influenced heavily by the needs of Chuki's workforce. Educational programs and technical colleges often emphasize mining-related fields, with Codelco participating in internship programs and pipelines that prepare students for employment. Although automation and modernization have reduced the total number of workers in recent years, the scale of this operation ensures that thousands remain directly engaged in copper production. From geologists and drill operators to chemical engineers and heavy machinery mechanics, nearly every role is connected to the mine. Chuquicamata represents one of the most prominent modern examples of a city region centered entirely on a single commodity. While the physical town may have ceased residential operations, the economic ecosystem around it is still built on the same premise: one job scaled across thousands of people. Number 3. Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada. Fort McMurray, located in northeastern Alberta, is one of the most prominent examples in North America of a city built and sustained by a single industry: oil sands extraction. Now, while the town technically functions as an urban service area within the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo, its identity and economic livelihood are overwhelmingly tied to the extraction and processing of bitumen from the nearby Athabasca oil sands. Over the past several decades, nearly every job in Fort McMurray, either directly or indirectly, has been related to this one industry. The Athabasca oil sands are among the largest petroleum deposits in the world, and Fort McMurray sits at the center of this massive complex. Oil companies like Suncor Energy, Syncrude, that's a consortium of firms including Suncor and Imperial Oil, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, and others operate out of the world's largest surface mining and in-situ extraction projects in the surrounding area. These companies employ thousands of people in roles ranging from heavy equipment and operation and mechanical maintenance to processing engineering, environmental monitoring, and site logistics. But due to the vast scale and complexity of oil sands operations, support services are critical. Local contractors and businesses provide housing, transportation, catering, IT services, industrial cleaning, and emergency response, nearly all designed around the schedules and demands of the oil sands operations. Few businesses in Fort McMurray operate entirely outside the economic orbit of the energy sector. Even those in retail, real estate, healthcare, and education typically cater to the needs of oil sands workers and their families. The work culture here reflects the specialized nature of the local economy. Many workers are employed on rotational shifts, known as FIFO or fly-in, fly-out, especially for remote job sites. These rotations may consist of 10 to 21-day work periods followed by equal rest days. The town's infrastructure, from transportation systems and temporary lodging, has been adapted to accommodate this lifestyle. The influx of workers, particularly during oil booms, has periodically strained the housing and municipal services here. During peak production years, real estate prices here skyrocketed, and infrastructure expansion often struggled to keep up. Schools, hospitals, and roads had to expand quickly to serve a growing population driven almost entirely by energy-related jobs. Despite the financial benefits of employment in the oil sands industry, where wages for tradespeople, engineers, and equipment operators are among the highest in the country, the region has also experienced some volatility. Global oil price fluctuations have led to cycles of hiring booms and then mass layoffs. For example, the oil price collapse in 2014 triggered a significant job loss and cutback in project expansions, affecting thousands of people and shrinking the town's population. The 2016 Fort McMurray wildfire, which led to the evacuation of nearly 90,000 people and destroyed thousands of homes, further tested the community. Recovery efforts were supported by oil companies, and rebuilding efforts were swift due to the town's strategic importance to Canada's energy. Despite this disaster, though, the town rebounded with a focus on maintaining its core function, supporting the oil sands operations. The layout of Fort McMurray reflects the purpose of it. The city is divided between residential neighborhoods, service centers, and access routes leading directly to industrial zones like the Mildred Lake and Aurora North facilities. Private charter flights shuttle workers to the remote work sites, and bus terminals and company transit hubs operate around the clock to move workers between housing and work sites. Although there are some efforts to diversify the economy through tourism, forestry, and alternative energy research, the scale and profitability of oil sands make them dominant. Government policy discussions around clean energy and climate targets have introduced some uncertainty into long-term planning, but for now, Fort McMurray remains deeply reliant on bitumen production. Oh yeah, social life in Fort McMurray, it's also shaped by the work culture. Recreational centers, sports leagues, and community events often operate on rotational schedules to align with the workers' shifts. Demographically, the population is highly mobile, with a large proportion of temporary workers and a significant number of residents who migrated from other provinces and countries for high-paying industrial jobs. This transience does reinforce the economic monoculture, as few secondary industries have even taken root to provide any stability during downtimes. Fort McMurray is often portrayed in national discourse as a symbol of Canada's resource wealth and its environmental challenges. The city is both a major contributor to national GDP and a focal point for climate policy debates. Despite the complex narratives that surround it, though, the underlying fact remains. Nearly every aspect of the town's existence is tied to one occupation: the extraction and processing of oil from sand. Even with the risks of boom-bust cycles and environmental criticism, the economic engine remains strong, and the town continues to serve its central role. It is one of the clearest and largest-scale examples of a single-job city operating in the developed world today. Number 2. Kawa Island in New Zealand. Kawa Island, located off the northeastern coast of New Zealand's North Island, is a small island that during the 19th century was home to a community whose livelihood revolved entirely around one occupation: copper mining. Although the island today is known for tourism and holiday homes, its historical significance as a single-job settlement is well documented. For a significant period in the mid-1800s, the island was dominated by mining operations at the Kawa copper mine, and nearly every resident was directly or indirectly involved in the copper extraction process. Copper deposits on the island were discovered in the 1840s, prompting commercial interest and rapid development. The mine, which began full-scale operations in 1844, attracted workers from across New Zealand and even from overseas. British and Cornish miners skilled in deep mining techniques were brought in to establish the operation, while unskilled laborers provided support in transport, hauling, and smelting. At its peak, the island supported a small but densely concentrated mining population, all housed in company-constructed residences. The operation included shafts, adits, a smelting furnace, tramways, and jetties for shipping ore, and because it's isolated from the mainland, the entire infrastructure needed to support mining, including housing, water supply, and food storage. It all had to be built and maintained on site. The community here was entirely self-contained, and the work week, social life, and public services were all organized around the demands of the copper mine. Due to the remoteness here and the absence of alternative industries, few, if any, residents had jobs outside the mining sector. Blacksmiths, engineers, timber workers, and boatmen all served functions that were either directly tied to the extraction and transport of copper or to maintaining the infrastructure necessary to keep the mining town open. Wages and provisions were managed through the mining operation, and nearly all materials were shipped in from Auckland or Australia. Over time, though, operational difficulties and falling copper prices led to a decline in their profitability. The mine did face frequent flooding due to its location below sea level, and despite early success, the output began to decline in the 1850s. By the mid-1860s, mining had largely ceased. The town's population fell rapidly as workers moved away in search of new employment, leaving behind industrial ruins and abandoned buildings. In the years following the closure of the mine, the island transitioned to private ownership. Notably, it was purchased by Governor George Gray in 1862, who transformed it into a private estate and introduced exotic animals and plants, many of which still remain. The infrastructure of the old mining town slowly disappeared or was repurposed. Although it's no longer a single-job town, it serves a historic example of how a remote location can be built entirely around a single industrial function. The remnants of the copper mining settlement, including preserved machinery, the former smelting site, and residential ruins, are now points of interest for visitors. Today, Kawa Island supports a small population primarily engaged in tourism, conservation, and hospitality. However, the legacy of the mining era is still visible in the geography, its restored historical buildings, and its place in New Zealand's industrial heritage. The story of the island shows the vulnerability and specificity of single-job communities, especially when tied to finite resources and isolated geographies. Number 1. Centriia, Pennsylvania. Centriia, Pennsylvania. It was once a small but bustling mining town in the heart of coal country. Established in the 1850s, the town thrived for more than a century almost entirely due to one occupation, anthracite coal mining. From its earliest days, Centriia was found, built, and sustained by a single industry, and every aspect of community life revolved around the extraction of coal. For generations, men worked underground in dangerous conditions, women managed the households and community life, and children were raised to eventually join the same cycle. But what makes it unique is not just how completely it relied on a single job, but how the very industry that created the town ultimately destroyed it, slowly, unpredictably, and irreversibly. Located in Columbia County in northeastern Pennsylvania, Centriia sat atop some of the richest anthracite coal deposits in the United States. Coal had already begun to transform Pennsylvania into an industrial powerhouse by the mid-19th century, and Centriia was ideally positioned to benefit from this expansion. The Locust Mountain Coal and Iron Company was one of the first to establish operations in the area. Mining tunnels were dug, collieries were built, and soon the town began to grow. The population swelled to over 2,500 by the early 1900s, with workers from Ireland, Poland, Ukraine, and Italy settling in the town for employment. Centriia became a classic example of a company town, with a company-owned housing, stores, schools, and churches all supporting the workers and their families. Nearly every household here had a direct connection to the mine. Employment options were largely limited to the underground work, rail yard support, blacksmithing, or jobs in the breaker facilities where raw coal was crushed and sorted. The pay was low, the hours were long, and the risk of injury constant, but the coal mining offered stability in a time when few other jobs existed. It also created a close-knit, interdependent community where generations of families lived within blocks of each other, shared traditions, and relied on each other for support. From school calendars to church festivals, the rhythm of life was governed by the mine. But coal mining also brought with it long-term risks. By the mid-20th century, Centriia was honeycombed with old mine shafts, tunnels, and abandoned workings. The town's entire foundation sat on layers of combustible material. Although mining provided economic stability, it also created the conditions for an environmental disaster of a unique kind. That disaster began in 1962. In May of that year, a routine effort to clean up the town landfill, which was located in an old strip mine pit, went horribly wrong. Firefighters set trash ablaze, a common practice at the time, but failed to fully extinguish it. Unknown to them, the fire reached a coal seam exposed in the pit and spread underground into the extensive network of abandoned tunnels beneath the town. Initially, the danger went unnoticed. Residents went about their lives while the fire crept silently through the coal beneath their feet. Over time, signs of the growing catastrophe became impossible to ignore. Sinkholes appeared in backyards and streets, smoke and steam vented from the cracks in the earth. Carbon monoxide levels, too, in basements began to rise to dangerous levels. In 1979, the crisis gained national attention when a local gas station owner, who also happened to be the town's mayor, found that the fuel in his underground tanks was heating up. That same year, tests showed deadly gases were leaking into homes. The most dramatic moment, though, came in 1981 when a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski fell into a sinkhole that suddenly opened up beneath him in his grandmother's backyard. He was pulled to safety, but the incident brought national media coverage and it revealed the true scale of the problem. The ground in Centriia was unstable and, in places, literally burning. Geological surveys and environmental assessments confirmed what many feared: the fire could not be extinguished with any known methods. Efforts to dig fire breaks, flood tunnels, or smother the blaze failed, and it was determined that the coal seam fire would continue for centuries, slowly expanding, making the town uninhabitable. With that conclusion, state and federal authorities began offering buyouts to residents, and in 1944, Congress allocated over $40 million to relocate the population. By the early 2000s, Centriia had become a ghost town in every sense of the term. The population had dwindled from over 1,000 to fewer than 10, and nature began reclaiming the land. Trees grew through cracked sidewalks, streets once lined with houses led to nowhere, and the grid of the town remained, but almost no buildings stood there. The environmental damage from the fire has been severe and long-lasting. The release of carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases has made the area dangerous for residents and wildlife. The destruction of Centriia has become a textbook case in environmental studies of what can go wrong when industrial activities intersect with poor planning and oversight. But perhaps most striking is how the city illustrates the risks of building a town around a single industry without safeguards. Anthracite coal brought prosperity, but it also left behind a literal and figurative hole in the ground. The dependence on coal was so absolute here that when the industry failed, through both natural disaster and structural decline, there was no way for the town to adapt. Its entire economy, infrastructure, and identity had been built around one job, and when that job became untenable, so too did the community.